Hello everyone! Welcome back to Easy English StoryLab. In this video, you will practice English with a real-life story made for B1 and B2 learners. We will use the shadowing technique. Listen carefully to each sentence, pause the video, and repeat after me. Try to copy the pronunciation, rhythm, and emotion. Do not worry about mistakes. Speaking comes from practice, not from perfection. Now let's begin the story. I was afraid to speak, not in a loud or dramatic way, but in a quiet way that lived inside me every day. My name is Emma, and I am 26 years old. I work in an international company in the city. English is the main language at work. I read English emails, write English reports, and listen to English meetings every day. But when it is time to speak, something inside me freezes. At school, teachers always told me I was a good student. They said I understood grammar well and that my writing was clear. Still, they also said one thing again and again. Emma, you need to speak more. I always nodded and promised myself I would try next time, but when next time came, fear stopped me. In meetings, my heart beat fast, my hands felt cold, and my mouth became dry. I had ideas, sometimes very good ideas, but they stayed locked inside my head. Other people spoke easily. They joked, shared opinions, and interrupted each other without fear. I watched them and wondered how speaking could look so simple for them. During lunch breaks, my coworkers talked about movies, travel, and their personal lives. I listened carefully and smiled at the right moments. Sometimes I laughed, even when I did not fully understand the joke. I wanted to join the conversation, but my words never came out naturally. When someone asked me a question, I answered quickly and quietly, using short sentences, then returned to silence. I told myself many excuses. My accent is not good. My vocabulary is not strong enough. What if I say something wrong? What if they laugh? What if they do not understand me? These thoughts repeated in my head every day, slowly building a wall between me and the people around me. The truth was simple. I was afraid of mistakes, afraid of being judged, afraid of sounding stupid. This fear followed me everywhere, at work, at social events, even when talking on the phone. I avoided situations where I had to speak for a long time. Silence felt safer than trying. One morning, my manager sent an email to the whole team. There would be a presentation next month. Everyone had to speak for 5 minutes about their current project. 5 minutes. When I read that number, my stomach tightened. 5 minutes felt like 5 hours. I reread the email many times, hoping I had misunderstood, but the words stayed the same. That night, I could not sleep. My mind was full of images. I imagined myself standing in front of the room, people watching me, waiting for my words. In my imagination, my voice shook. I forgot what I wanted to say. My face turned red. The scene felt so real that my heart started beating faster in the dark. The next morning, I almost wrote to my manager. I wanted to ask if I could skip the presentation. I wanted to say I was sick or too busy. I searched for excuses that would sound reasonable. My fingers touched the keyboard, but I did not send anything. Something inside me stopped me. A few days later, during lunch, a new colleague sat next to me. Her name was Sophia. She had joined the company only 2 weeks earlier. She smiled warmly and asked me how long I had been working there. I answered politely, using my usual short sentences. Then she surprised me. She said she was nervous about her first presentation, too. I looked at her with curiosity. She seemed confident and calm, the kind of person who spoke easily. I asked her why she was nervous. She laughed softly and said that speaking in front of people always scared her, even after many years of experience. Hearing this shocked me. I had never imagined that someone like her could feel the same fear I felt. We talked for a while, and for the first time in a long time, I forgot to be afraid. I spoke more than usual. My sentences were not perfect, but Sophia listened patiently. She did not correct me or rush me. She simply listened. When lunch ended, she told me something that stayed in my mind all afternoon. She said, "Fear does not disappear on its own. You have to walk through it." That sentence followed me back to my desk. Walk through it. I did not know how, but for the first time I felt that maybe my fear was not a permanent part of me. Maybe it was something I could slowly face, step by step. After that conversation with Sophia, something inside me slowly began to change. Not suddenly, not magically, but quietly. I started paying attention to my fear instead of running away from it. I noticed how it appeared before meetings, how it tightened my chest, and how it made my thoughts race. Before, I tried to ignore it. Now, I tried to understand it. I decided to prepare seriously for the presentation. Every evening after work, I opened my laptop and wrote what I wanted to say. At first, my sentences were long and complicated. When I read them aloud, they sounded unnatural. So I rewrote them. I made them shorter, clearer, more natural. I practiced speaking slowly, one sentence at a time. The first days were hard. When I practiced alone in my apartment, my voice still shook. Sometimes I stopped and laughed nervously at myself. Sometimes I felt tired and wanted to quit. But I remembered Sophia's words. Fear does not disappear on its own. You have to walk through it. At work, I started making small changes. During meetings, I forced myself to speak at least once. Sometimes I only said one sentence. Sometimes my voice was very quiet, but each time I spoke, I felt a small sense of relief. Nothing bad happened. No one laughed. No one judged me. People listened and moved on. One afternoon, my manager asked a question during a meeting. There was silence in the room. I knew the answer. My heart started beating fast, and my hands felt cold. I almost stayed quiet, but then I took a breath and spoke. My sentence was not perfect, but it was clear. My manager nodded and thanked me. That moment stayed with me for the rest of the day. I began practicing speaking outside of work too. When I ordered coffee, I spoke more clearly. When I talked to coworkers, I added one more sentence instead of stopping early. These were small steps, but they mattered. Each step made the next one feel slightly easier. Still, fear did not disappear. Some days were better than others. Some days I felt confident. Other days my old habits returned. On those days, I reminded myself that progress is not a straight line. It moves forward, backward, and forward again. As the presentation day came closer, my anxiety increased. I practiced every night. I stood in front of the mirror and spoke. I imagined my coworkers listening. Sometimes I made mistakes, but instead of stopping, I continued. I learned that making a mistake did not mean everything was ruined. The night before the presentation, I barely slept. My mind was full of thoughts. What if I forget my words? What if my voice shakes too much? What if I embarrass myself? I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, trying to calm my breathing. At some point, I realized something important. Even if everything went wrong, I would survive. The fear felt big, but it was not dangerous. The next morning, I arrived at the office early. I sat quietly at my desk, reviewing my notes one last time. Sophia walked past and smiled at me. She wished me luck. That small gesture gave me comfort. I was not alone in this experience. When it was time for the presentation, my name was called. I stood up slowly and walked to the front of the room. My legs felt heavy, but I kept moving. I looked at the faces in front of me. Some people smiled, some looked tired. They were just people, not judges. I took a deep breath and began to speak. The first sentence was the hardest. My voice was not as strong as I wanted, but it was there. Once I started, something surprising happened. The words began to flow. I focused on one sentence at a time, just like I practiced. I made a small mistake in the middle. I noticed it immediately. My heart jumped, but I did not stop. I corrected myself and continued. No one reacted. No one cared. They were listening to the message, not counting my errors. As I reached the end, I felt a strange mix of fear and pride. When I finished, the room was quiet for a second. Then people clapped. Not loudly, not dramatically, but sincerely. I smiled, feeling something warm spread inside my chest. I returned to my seat, my hands shaking slightly, but my mind calm. I had done it. It was not perfect, but it was real. For the first time, I felt my voice had a place in that room. After the presentation, the day continued as usual. People returned to their desks, emails arrived, meetings ended. But inside me, something was different. I felt lighter. The fear that had lived in my chest for so long was still there, but it was smaller, quieter. It no longer controlled me. That afternoon, my manager stopped by my desk. He thanked me for the presentation and said my ideas were clear and useful. I nodded and smiled, feeling proud but calm. For the first time, I did not feel the need to hide or apologize for my voice. In the days that followed, I noticed changes in myself. I spoke more during meetings. I asked questions when I did not understand something. I shared opinions even when I was unsure. Sometimes my voice still shook, and sometimes I searched for the right words, but I kept speaking. Fear did not disappear completely. It still visited me before important conversations, but now I understood it better. Fear was not a wall anymore. It was a signal, a sign that something mattered. Outside of work, my life changed too. I joined conversations more easily. I told stories. I laughed louder. I stopped planning every sentence in my head before speaking. I learned that communication is not about perfection. It is about connection. One evening, I met Sophia for coffee. We talked about work, life, and small victories. I thanked her for that lunch conversation weeks ago. She smiled and said she was glad I had walked through my fear. Hearing those words made me realize how far I had come. I started practicing English differently after that. Instead of avoiding speaking, I looked for chances to use my voice. I spoke aloud when reading. I repeated sentences from videos. I used shadowing to copy pronunciation, rhythm, and emotion. Slowly, my confidence grew. Looking back, I realized something important. I was never afraid of English itself. I was afraid of being seen, afraid of making mistakes in front of others, afraid of not being good enough. But once I allowed myself to be imperfect, my voice found its way out. Today, I still make mistakes. I still pause sometimes to think, but I speak, and that makes all the difference. If you are listening to this story and you feel afraid to speak, I want you to know something. You are not weak. You are not alone. Fear is a common part of learning a language, but fear does not have to decide your future. Now, let's practice together. Play this video again. Pause after each sentence. Repeat it out loud. Copy the pronunciation, rhythm, and emotion. This is the shadowing technique. It works because it trains your brain to speak naturally. Do not wait until you feel ready. Speak before you feel ready. Confidence comes after action, not before it. Your voice matters, even if it is quiet, even if it shakes. Thank you for learning with Easy English StoryLab. Keep practicing, keep speaking, and remember, one day can change everything.